Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. My guest today is Martin Pazzani. Martin describes himself as a seasoned global executive, a classically trained chief marketing officer in consumer goods and services who morphed into a highly entrepreneurial CEO and startup advisor. He is highly experienced in the executive C-suite, inside an ad agency with investor groups and shareholders, and as an entrepreneur. He was the first chief marketing officer of Bally and Crunch, as well as with dozens of Fortune 500 company clients and a portfolio of startups on 6 continents, where he acquired potent skills for aligning marketing, sales and operations, achieving strategic advantage, driving growth, and orchestrating all the pieces toward lofty goals. Today, Martin is a serial entrepreneur immersed in 2 principal areas: fitness technology for people above the age of 50, and ultra-premium craft spirits. An interesting combination with a common thread that requires a balance of entrepreneurship, strategic vision, marketing savvy, and a penchant for reimagining the future. Martin earned 3 college degrees in just over 5 years, a BA in psychology, a BS in marketing, and an MBA. Martin says he's always been drawn to difficult challenges. He's climbed the summits of major mountains on all 7 continents, explored Antarctica, Easter Island, Ngorongoro Crater, the equatorial rainforests, the deserts of United Arab Emirates, Mexican volcanoes, and in addition, as a former F2000 race driver, he has a keen appreciation for the value of precision, speed, and high performance. Martin is also the best-selling author of The Secrets of Aging Well, Get Outside, The Mountains Made Me an Entrepreneur, due in the fall of 2025, and The Secrets of Aging Well, the Get Outside Workout, due in the winter of 2025. And today, he's my guest on the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. Stick around. This is going to be great. I'm just tired hearing about all those mountains you climbed.
I've heard listening to it, actually.
I'm sure you've heard it more than once, right?
Mike, truthfully, and thank you for that. Really, that's probably the best introduction ever. So thank you. But, it's really a testament to longevity. I've been in business and I'm 68 and I've never slowed down. So from finishing that MBA to now, I like to keep going. I'm very, very energetic and I do a lot of things simultaneously. So you get a lot done when you're like that, I guess. And I intend to keep doing it. So yeah.
Well,
cool.
I think the skill or the art, probably a little bit of both, of being able to multitask, do several things simultaneously is a prerequisite for entrepreneurship.
I think that I eventually became an entrepreneur. I had way too much I wanted to do to be constrained by the walls of a single corporation. And as much as I like that for a period, it did start to feel constraining. I just think I have a lot I want to do, and I want to get there. And again, we're going to talk about retirement later. I know I don't intend to retire. I had a couple of good role models at one point, some guys who were in their late 80s and 90s who were still going to the office every day. And I crossed paths with them in the fitness business when I was about 50. And it was a real eye-opener. I went, that's really incredible. These guys are still going strong at a very, very advanced age. And I wouldn't know what to do with retirement anyway. I mean, just sitting around watching TV, Netflix, and golfing just seems kind of counterproductive. So
yeah, I used to belong to a CEO peer group where we meet once a month and exaggerate how well we're doing, and with each other. And we would have a speaker come in for the first hour, and these were like all-day meetings. So the first hour would be a speaker, usually someone, hawking a book or something. And this one speaker was actually really good. And the one takeaway that I can still remember, this was many years ago, was they were talking about exit strategies and retirement and for business owners. And his point was that when you retire, you need to have a purpose. You need to have a reason for a routine to get up every morning. And, a lot of people will, just like when someone graduates high school before college, they might take a gap year, and travel and play. statistically, gap years are a little dangerous because they lead to, gap decades and gap lifetimes. And so if someone retires and says, okay, I'm going to start a routine, but I'm going to take a gap year. I'm just going to like lounge around the house and sit by the pool and do that for the first year or so. If they don't go back and start a routine, if they're not busy, if they don't have a cadence of activity, then statistically they're dead in 5 years. That's just the way it is.
On the way I've kind of addressed that issue is, and because there's always times when, being an entrepreneur or a busy corporate guy, you feel like I've had it. I'm just going to quit. The way I've addressed that is about every 5 years, I've taken a sabbatical of a month or two. In one case, it was about 4 months. And in between jobs, usually, sometimes it was shorter. I had to come back because of a career thing. But I find the sabbatical to be the way to recharge the battery and start anew and kind of reload the ammo, that you need to get through these demanding and high pressure situations. So I love sabbaticals, and I'm almost due. It's been 5 years since my last one, so kind of like thinking,
you're due.
Go? Yeah.
So if you just walk off camera right now, I know you've started your sabbatical.
I promise I won't. But yeah,
okay. Yeah. Hold it off for a little bit.
Yeah.
Were you, obviously you weren't always an entrepreneur as we define entrepreneur, but have you always been entrepreneurial?
Yes.
Even when you were working in your day job?
I didn't know this was a word at the time, but my boss in the 80s said I was an intrapreneur, which meant
right.
internal corporate entrepreneur. I always had ideas for how to do things better and ideas for how to do things differently. I just am sort of not made up to go with the status quo, and I'm not made to be a maintenance manager. I like to improve and fix and tinker and that kind of thing. And early in my corporate career, I became known as a fix-it guy. I was a brand manager in marketing, and I would inherit somebody's broken brand, and a year and a half later it was fixed. And just as it was getting easy, the CEO would say, well, I got a new assignment for you. And they'd move you to another brand. And it just went on for a decade like that. And
a fixer.
I loved it. I was well rewarded, well regarded, but it was exhausting fixing problems all the time. And then after that job, I was there for 13 years. I was kind of known as a fix-it guy. And so as a result, 3 corporate roles in a row were turnarounds. So I needed to do turnarounds. And it got to be really exhausting, as rewarding as it was. And I'm not complaining about it. It was great at the time. You're in your 30s and 40s. You've got the wherewithal. You want to prove yourself. And I was loving the idea of being a fix-it guy, turnaround guy. But then at some point it got to be, hey, what if I did it myself from the beginning and it wasn't broken? I just did it right. And I didn't have to fix the problem. I just kind of introduced something of my own. And over 5 years or so, that kind of became my evolution into becoming an entrepreneur. So it was a slow process.
I think entrepreneurs generally speaking, make terrible employees. Actually, we make great employees. We're just not appreciated for what we bring to the table.
In the right role, it's great. And in the wrong role, in a company that doesn't appreciate a lot of entrepreneurship thinking, in a company that wants just maintenance, it's a terrible thing. I've never actually had one of those. I've always, I know you're going to ask me questions about worst job. I never had one of those losing jobs. It was always maybe challenging, more so, but I've never had one of those jobs where I had to just be the drone and go through the motions. I stayed away from that. It's kind of funny. I live in Connecticut, and I went to UConn. That's where I got my MBA. And when you come out of UConn in Connecticut, you've got limited choices because Hartford, Connecticut is the insurance capital of the world. So had a lot of interesting offers from insurance companies. And I'm sitting around going, oh, am I actually going to work in the insurance business? Because it's really not that interesting to me, but it's right there and it's lucrative. And then out of the blue, I got a feeler, which turned into my first job, from a company called Hubline. And at the time, Hubline was a diversified consumer products company. We owned Kentucky Fried Chicken. We owned A1 steak sauce and Grey Poupon mustard. And then there was a distilled spirits division, which had Smirnoff vodka, Jose Cuervo tequila, and a lot of other great wines and spirits. And I got that job. And I was like it was the right time, the right place. And I was doing cartwheels because those were interesting brands to me that I actually used, and you can relate to them. And I was kind of a consumer marketer, and I just never really thought I could apply myself in the insurance field or the financial field. I love consumer products. And because you mentioned I had a degree in psychology, I always thought of myself as a consumer behavior expert. And that to me was much more applicable in consumer products. And so I wound up working in the spirits division for 13 years. It was a lot of fun. It was great. Smirnoff vodka, Jose Cuervo tequila, in the heyday of that industry. It was fantastic. Growth, double digits every year. It was wonderful, wonderful experience.
And I can see those were probably seeds for your ultimate journey into the premium spirits category.
Absolutely, totally. When you get to the stage where you want to be an entrepreneur, you fall back on what you know best.
Right.
And I had, in the middle of my career, being a fix-up guy, I jumped industries quite a bit. And I had the simultaneously wonderful and difficult experience of jumping into categories where you were not expert. You had to learn fast and make change. And that was also fun, but hard to have great success on. It's riskier because you don't know the playing field, you don't know the situation, and there's a lot of learning. And that learning curve takes time. And in that time, sometimes you miss some things. So that's another thing that factored into my entrepreneurship. I fell into entrepreneurship in two areas: fitness and distilled spirits, because that's what I knew corporately the best. So there we are.
I can see those were dots on the path, on your career trajectory. And I think that's a great way to start, because if you're going to learn on someone's dime, and if you're going to make mistakes, try and make them on someone else's dime.
Right, it's a great lesson, but I never thought of it that way at the time, because in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, when my career started, that was the path. You got an MBA and you went down the corporate path. That was kind of like what was expected. And I played that, I played that role pretty well. But that's not the case anymore. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur now. Corporate life is very different, 50 years later now, 40 years later.
Yeah.
So
how did you evolve from your Fortune 500 world and ad agency and spirit distribution and all of that into the world of entrepreneurship? Was it an intentional act? Was it a fulfillment of a dream? Was it just one of those happenstance stumble on it opportunities, or what?
This was a little bit of all of that. As I said, it took me about 5 years to figure that out. I had these entrepreneurial instincts, but I didn't quite know how to be an entrepreneur. At some point, I felt comfortable enough financially to take the risk to just jump. And I think that's an important thing, because you don't want to jump into entrepreneurship if you don't have a cushion to land on. And at the time, I always felt if things didn't work, or if I didn't like it, I could go back to the corporate world. So it was conscious but slow. And now I'm hooked on it. I mean, I could never go back to corporate world. The things that frustrated me about corporate life were the slow pace, the bureaucracy, the too many cooks in the equation.
Yeah.
And I like collaborating, but too much collaboration and too much procedure and policy and whatever, it just slows you down, and it gets very frustrating for a marketing-oriented entrepreneur. You just feel like you're going nowhere fast.
Yeah, it reminds me of the scene in the original Raiders of the Lost Ark. Harrison Ford's being chased. All of a sudden, in the middle of a chase, he comes across this bad guy with a sword, and the guy's just flipping a sword in the air and all that. And Harrison Ford looks at his watch and just pulls out his gun and shoots him. He's like, I don't have time to fight you. That's the way entrepreneurs are. If they move backwards into the 9-to-5 world, we would get fired in in the first 6 minutes because we don't do stupid. B, because we've been the stupid people. We've learned from that, and we draw outside the lines. We're kind of bulls in china shops, and we, as I said earlier, we really don't make. I think we make great employees, but we wouldn't be able to survive in a typical corporate world. So what was the last regular kind of 9 to 5, paycheck job you had before you jumped into the cold end of the deep pool?
I was the CEO of a music company, bi-coastal music company that had some tendrils into Europe. And I was at the time also bi-coastal. I had an apartment in New York and an apartment in Santa Monica. And I was back and forth. Music industry during a very critical time in the music industry was a fix-it job. And the music industry was converting from analog to digital. And so there's a lot of change going on. And I was an outsider. I had used music very effectively as a marketing guy, and I understood music. And I don't want to say I'm a musician, but I play the drums a little bit. But I kind of relate to music world. So anyway, I fit into this job, a company owned by a private equity firm that needed a turnaround guy who was from outside the industry to look at things freshly. And so I did that for about 4 years. It was kind of fun. I learned a whole lot of stuff, but it was exhausting trying to fit me, a kind of a square peg into a round hole of the music industry, at the same time pretty much living on an airplane. I mean, it was crazy,
Sure.
Crazy distance back and
Road
forth.
warrior, yeah.
Up and, there was one week where I think I went from LA to Dubai at a conference, then to London, then back to LA, then to New York. I mean, they say there's this thing called air travel psychosis you get from changing time zones so much. I might have had it. I don't know. I was really tired and grumpy. And so anyway, I did that for a while. And then that was pretty much the jump into entrepreneurship. I took some time and I said, I got to figure this out. And lo and behold, as I was just starting to think that way, one of my closest business associates reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to do a rum brand together? And I went, oh yeah, maybe that is the answer. Maybe going back to my roots is the way to do it. And that led to creating a tequila company. We decided rum was the wrong way to go. I knew a lot about tequila.
I'm a little disappointed. Rum's my favorite drink. So
yeah,
I'm just a little disappointed in you, Martin.
But I was a tequila and a vodka and a whiskey guy. So I didn't ever really understand that end of the business. But anyway, tequila turned out to be a really good thing. And we created a nice little company that's still thriving. And yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It was great. And that was like 12, 13 years ago.
So when you first ventured into entrepreneurship, when you started your own company, you'd mentioned that you didn't want to run out of money. There had to be some resources there. How did you put capital in the company? Was just your own savings, or did you raise money somehow, borrow money, get investor money?
Partner money and family and friends money. I've never raised money in my entrepreneur world from the outside. I haven't had to. So, and I also, I wanted to on one of my fitness ventures. I thought private equity money or seed capital money from a VC would have been the way to go, but it never happened. We had kind of a visionary approach to where we wanted to go in the fitness business, and they didn't seem to latch on to the idea. And I met with a lot of VCs for a few years, and then we decided to do it on our own with seed capital from friends and family. But yeah, it's I have great respect for someone who can figure out right from the start how to raise millions of dollars for a startup. Wow, what a great thing! But that's not the path I've taken. It's been smaller startups and self-funded.
Yeah, that's good. Although I do think there's a greater sense of responsibility and pressure when the money you're borrowing is from family and friends as opposed to a bank or something like that. Just from I got to pay these guys back because I'm going to see them every day, or I'm going to run into them from time to time during holidays.
A different kind of pressure. Bankers are used to losing money. Family and friends are not.
That's right. That's right. So there are always challenges in anything in life. Climbing a mountain is challenging. I guess I wouldn't know. But certainly entrepreneurship is challenging, and
Mhm.
in probably many analogies to climbing a mountain. But what were some of the biggest challenges that you face in entrepreneurship, and what is your method of scaling those challenges, of getting on the other side?
Well, I'm not sure there's one answer to that. I do know there's some common elements to being successful. And, truthfully, I've had some small successes. I haven't had an Elon Musk level success kind of thing. And that's what everybody shoots for when you're an entrepreneur. I mean, I didn't do this to create mom and pop companies. I wanted to, in every case, create something that had lasting value, turned and scaled up to something significant, and then a very successful exit is planned. Um, so I'm still a work in progress on that thing. I have a bunch of things that will, I believe, turn into very, very successful exits. But we're still working on the home run. I've hit a lot of singles and doubles, but we're working on the home run. So I don't know that I've got the answer to that one. Like, I mean, um, good team is important. Having the ability to understand the market, having a really good idea to start with is the critical thing. I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have ideas that most of them are bad ideas. So they're kind of doomed from the beginning. But a really good idea, good team, enough resources, and I don't mean giant resources, but you just have to know how to manage the resources, and you have to know how to execute. I mean, usually it always comes down to execution, getting things done and moving towards making the company profitable and starting to scale. And then there's the issue of how to scale, because it's easy to have a mom and pop company, but then how do you turn it into the giant thing that's got great value?
And
So
we're going to talk about growth and scaling, which, by the way, I do believe are two entirely different things. But before we get there, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics states that ultimately 75% of all businesses fail.
hmm,
Ultimately, I think it's 70% by year 15, and then beyond that, it's 75%, which is, if that was a table game in Vegas, that'd be pretty horrible, horrible odds. I'd rather play the 49-51 odds, like roulette offers or something, than 70-30 odds. But particularly when the payoff isn't that big. So, what based on your experience and your observations, both within the corporate world and in the entrepreneurial world, what, in your opinion, would be some of the common reasons that 70% or 75% of businesses ultimately fail? I wonder if you see a commonality there, a common thread.
well, again, I think having a bad idea at the start is the number one reason it will fail. So you can keep a bad patient alive for a while, but you can't let it. It's not going to live forever. So that's number one. I think partnership issues are always a challenge. I've had some companies that I thought were brilliantly conceived, but partnership squabbles either made it slower or changed the direction of it and created bad feelings, and people go their separate ways as a result of that. Um, I think, again, failure to pivot is also, I think, one of the things that entrepreneurs, being stubborn and persistent people, sometimes can't see that the market feedback is saying, you got to change your business model, or you got to tweak this here. Pivoting is critical to an entrepreneur. You're rarely going to come right out of the gate with all the answers. So inability to adapt to the changing market and adjusting your plan and your aim, and pretty much being open to the market feedback that you get when you launch a company is critical. Um, Persistence is also good. So you have to know how to balance that. You have to know if the feedback you're getting is telling you to change, or you have to change something about how you're positioning yourself and marketing yourself. So, um, and then the other thing, it's kind of funny. A lot of I think one of the things that is a success factor in entrepreneurship is, does your company actually solve a problem that needs to be solved? It's nice to be in a business that you want to be in, but if it's the same as 100 other businesses, or it doesn't do anything new or unique or meaningful, well, now it doesn't have much of a chance really
Right.
to proceed. So are you solving a problem that needs to be solved is a critical thing you have to ask yourself as an entrepreneur. Is there a need? Is there a real consumer demand or need? And now demand is the wrong word. Is there a consumer
Desire?
opportunity? Desire? No, not even that, because there's a lot of businesses that consumers don't know they need it until it's there in front of them. Like I always
Yeah.
use,
My business is that way. My business solves a problem that people don't really realize they have.
the case study I always loved is FedEx. I mean, Fred Smith was one of my business heroes. And as the founder of FedEx, he wrote the business plan when he was at Yale, and he gave the paper to his business professors, and they gave him like a D. They said, nobody needs overnight delivery. Who needs overnight delivery? It's ridiculous. We got the post office. Well, thank God he didn't listen to them, because, he and most people, when presented with the idea, originally said, I don't think I need that. But then there it was. And all of a sudden it's like, look how FedEx expedited delivery has changed the global economy. It's one of the most influential
Yeah.
companies in history, and people didn't even know they needed it.
And
So
isn't he famous for when things were really bad and he needed money, I don't know, to buy an airplane or to make a payment or whatever? Didn't he go to Vegas and put some company money down and make a big bet?
that sounds familiar. I may have forgotten that. That does
Yeah.
kind of sound familiar. But again, being entrepreneurial, those kind of risks seem kind of sensible to him, I think, so.
Absolutely.
But what a risky business plan to put something together. Ultimately, now, legitimately, I mean, his FedEx's business model now has been adopted by DHL, by UPS, and
Yeah.
those three companies have inarguably changed the global economy.
Yeah, I totally agree. You mentioned a couple of words I want to drill down on. You mentioned pivot and you mentioned persistence. So let's talk about pivot. I liken the pivot. My analogy for that is, shifting gears in a car. When entrepreneurs start a business, they have some really good first gear skills. They are kind of bulls in china shops. They probably have a little bit of ego, a little bit of arrogance, maybe a little bit of naivety. Those were all of the attributes I brought to the table. And they're so needed in those days because you have to go against the odds. The odds are against you. You have to think, well, they don't apply to me. So there's the ego part and the arrogance and the naivety. But first gear, in a manual transmission or any transmission, first gear is highly leveraged. It's lots of RPM, not a lot of speed. It gets you going, but you can't go far or fast on first gear. You ruin your transmission or your engine. Second gear are different sets of skills. Third gear, another set of skills. You can't start in fifth. If you think you know everything, you probably know a little bit too much. You may not have the guts and the persistence and the just the bull in a china shop mentality to start something from scratch. You might be too smart to say, no, this is crazy. I don't want to do this. I'm going to have 4 years of sleepless nights and no money because you've been there before. So it's definitely a first gear mentality. I think a lot of the reasons I asked you earlier, why do you think businesses fail? I think one of the reasons, and this is what you're saying too, is they fail to pivot, and or they fail to learn new skills, or they fail to acquire those new skills because they think that what got them from A to B will carry them from B to C and further. And I think what gets you from A to B will kill you from B to C because it's a different skill set, different set of gears, different all that. The other word you mentioned is persistence. How in entrepreneurship, it's kind of like whack-a-mole. It's just someone's always got a mallet and it's just trying to smash you down on the head, metaphorically, thankfully. How do you find the persistence and the perseverance to just keep going? And because it does, take a little bit off you every time you get knocked down. Some people, when they get knocked down, they're ready to fight. That's what they needed. And some, it takes away some of their energy and their desire and hope. So how do you handle things that require persistence, defeat and challenges and things like that?
Well, I think it's a complex question, and obviously it's the magic potion for entrepreneurship. I think, first of all, I think I'm naturally energetic. So, and I'm naturally stubborn. So I don't give up easily. And I think that's the origin of it. There's been some psychological studies that say the first child is kind of always a good entrepreneur. I'm number one of four. So maybe I've got that kind of leadership, and I'm the number one guy mentality. That might be a factor in the psychological underpinnings of why I am the way I am. I think also I found it very critical to stay fit throughout my career. I'm a gym rat, and we talked about my book. My book is all about fitness at age 50 and up, via hiking and climbing and working out for that. So I think fitness gives you the mental and physical stamina to keep going. So that's been important to me as well. I think you have to have a purpose. I mean, I feel, you talk about goal orientation, but it's got to be a goal you really want to achieve. And if you're doing something you feel passionate about, and it's meaningful, and it's got a purpose for you, it's easier to stay motivated than if you're just a maintenance guy or doing something you don't like. So really complex stuff that creates this entrepreneurship drive and keeps you going. But it is one of those critical things, because there's setbacks. I'm sure you've seen that diagram. The day in the lifetime of an entrepreneur. It's not a steady uphill climb. It's up, down, up, down. There's a trough. Then there's the peak of hell, and then the mountain peak, and then you fall off the cliff. And that's kind of the way things go with entrepreneurship. It's never smooth. So, persistence and the resilience to rebound from that is critical. And I think you have to learn that after a while. The first time you drop something or fail, you're crushed. But you see that that's not the end of the world. You can pick it up and keep going forward. And you can create rebirth out of failure over and over. I've seen it so many times. And, other people's case studies help give you the confidence to keep going. And but it's the critical skill but then you have to balance it, what we talked about, because if you're completely stubborn and persistent on a bad idea, you're burn out, or you're going to waste a lot of time, effort, and money. So you have to kind of always be reassessing. Do I think I still have a shot at this? You got to be realistic about these ventures, and at some point maybe turning the page on that and going to something else is probably useful. And I've done that a couple of times. Probably lasted too long on a couple as well, but you learn it over time. And again, I think these are things you learn over time. I don't know that a young entrepreneur can have all those skills and experiences. No. And as we both know, you learn from your failures probably more than you learn from your successes. You learn a heck of a lot from things that don't work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the challenges for entrepreneurs is our mindset is that we can do the impossible. We don't see the word impossible. We do things that others have tried and failed at. So we have an experience in overcoming challenging ideas and doing what hasn't been done before. And with that experience, that can present kind of a blindness to some real realities. There are business experts that talk about the fail fast method. If you're going to fail fast. Once you get to the point where something isn't going to work, stop, let it go, move forward. And that's really difficult for me as an entrepreneur, because I have tried things and failed and kept at it and ultimately succeeded. And, I always think, well, if I just walk away too soon, maybe I was just right around the corner from inventing the perfect light bulb. Edison supposedly, had more than 1,000 failed experiments on light bulbs. It was like I don't know what the number was, 1,010, it worked. And what if he gave up at 999? Ultimately we would have light today. Someone would have figured it out, but we would have been dark for a little while longer, right? So I think that's a tough position for entrepreneurs because I've seen it. I've seen them, basically spend their last company dollar chasing something that, they weren't able to do and not letting go and being obsessed with something. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of the fail fast mentality, and which comes with experience and savvy and wisdom and all of that. And it is fail fast, but not too fast. Really have that discernment, which only I think comes from gut and experience.
There's another way to approach this issue of persistence and knowing when to quit. I've been in the fitness business for a long time. I've had a personal mission that I was hoping to play a role in reinventing fitness as upstream preventive healthcare. The fitness business has a lot of flaws. One of which is it's not respected by the medical community or the healthcare community. It's just considered a scammy business with scammy personal trainers and companies that are trying to take advantage of you. But when I joined it, I saw as chief marketing officer of Bally and Crunch, I saw the opportunity to kind of fundamentally change the business to something that was trusted. And I created this personal mission in my head. And it wasn't going to work at a big corporation like Bally and Crunch. And then I did a couple of startups in that area, and always with the mission of, again, reinventing fitness as upstream preventive healthcare, which meant elevating it to something closer to medical fitness. And then I added on to it let's focus on the 50 plus market, because I do know that's where the opportunity is. Not only do people 50 up and up need fitness more than anything else, but they have the most money to spend on fitness and the most time. And but no one's really doing that particularly well. And so a couple of my startups were in that area, and both, they're still out there, but I left them and they were the wrong approach. They started to turn into something that wasn't what I had intended. So I did kind of walk away from that, but not from the mission. I have an idea how to do it better. And one of my future ventures is a fitness company that's focused on people above age 50, uniquely focused on it in a way that no one else is doing. And I first identified this opportunity when I was at Bally. The numbers were screaming that this company's all focused on the youth market. No one was focusing on the senior market, and it's a different kind of fitness. And the customer experience was all wrong for people above 50. And I still have that in my head, and no one has yet figured it out. So I'm not even at my advanced age of 68. I'm not giving up on that venture. And I got a little team working in the background on how to cultivate that. Although it's a distant priority because I got a lot of other balls in the air, I am still interested in that mission. It seems worthy and more necessary.
I agree. It sounds like perfect in many ways, because you've got a much more mature, and I mean kind of psychologically mature customer base with better defined goals, probably more realistic goals than maybe younger people might have. You've got, generally speaking, a secure income in that group. They know what they can spend, and there's a social aspect of it that's probably in need. There's clearly different physical considerations for that group. I can see that. I can totally see that as both fitness and
it's
social,
an odd
all of it.
thing, because all the rational numbers speak to this gigantic opportunity, yet no one is taking it. Now, there's other instances of this in almost every industry. Marketers are forgetting about the 50 plus population. They're all so focused on youth market. Automobile industry's focused on it.
Yeah.
The advertising business is focused on it. And forget the fitness business for a minute. 2/3 of the income and capital resides in the pockets of people above age 50. So it's just so basic to me that why wouldn't you focus on that instead of pretending they didn't exist from a strategic standpoint? I have some friends in Manhattan who created an ad agency that specialized in creating messaging for people above age 50. It was called Agency 50. They were really smart people, friends for a long, long time. They couldn't really make it work. You couldn't get even American Express or BMW or all these companies that sell a lot of goods and services to 50 plus people to focus on it.
That's funny because I don't know how many 21-year-olds have American Express cards. That's usually a little later.
It just baffles me that this is still an opportunity in so many categories. And here I am playing this secrets of aging well, how to not retire and live forever. And there's more people. The stats are showing the fastest growing part of the population is people above 90. It's growing exponentially. So there's not really above 50 isn't really a niche market. It's the mass market. And yet people treating it like it's an afterthought. So it's kind of a mystery.
Madison Avenue, advertising agencies, the golden demographic, I think, is like 18 to 26-year-olds.
And the employee at an ad agency is about 32 right now. So they just don't get it. They're not going to get it either. So that's why it's an opportunity, but
let's get some more business nuggets for my audience here. What's the difference between growth and scaling in your mind, and what is the importance of scaling and managing growth?
I'm not sure I have a precise definition about the difference. Growth is, 5% a year, keeps something going upward. Scaling is massive exponential increases to create a massive company to me. And that's where all the excitement comes. Like for instance, in the fitness business, one of the challenges is how to go from one startup location to a company that has 500 locations. That's where the value is, right? How do you create what some of the most successful fitness companies have done to create many, many locations? Well, it's really easy to go from one club to 2 clubs to 3 clubs to 4 clubs. That's sequential entrepreneurship. You're doing one after the other. The key thing, though, is to understand how to create a structure, an infrastructure, people, a team who can go from one club to 10 to 50 to 200. That's the goal. And it's a totally different skill set because you have to understand how to manage people and resources and create structure because you can't do it all yourself. So if you don't understand structure, which I came from structure, so I do understand that. All my companies, my corporate companies, had big structure around them. You know what kind of organization you need. People who start with one location of something, one retail store, one gym, it's very hard for them to see how to scale. They can grow, but scaling becomes a challenge because you got to.
That's exactly what I was getting at. Thank you. That's perfect because in my business experience, I thought, well, we're having problems, but every problem can be solved with growth. We just need more business. I didn't realize that growth without scale is you're doomed. You're just going to grow yourself into the ground. You're going to run out of money. So we would sell one machine, make the profit from one machine, and then we would sell 3 more. Now we have to build 3 machines with the profit of one, and then we'd sell 6 more. And so the more sales we had, the less money we had, right? We were like, profit. I didn't even care about profit. Profit was never, in the first few years, was never anywhere front of mind. It was cash flow. I just needed to cover payroll, or whatever, and rent and all of that. So to me, it's like, I'll worry about profit next year, whenever. Right now, I just need to cover payroll. So I would do terrible deals just to get some cash in, just to cover payroll. It was like a pyramid scheme. I was a Bernie Madoff, with my own money, right? Fooling myself. And I think that rapid growth is a luxury most small businesses can't afford. Scaling, on the other hand, is not just growth. Scaling, as you've mentioned, is investing in the people, investing in the infrastructure, the logistics, all the things that go along with growth that's managed properly. So it takes an investment to scale. It's not done with the same money necessarily that you made as a smaller business. There has to be a really well-planned strategic roadmap to scaling. And I think that's where so many businesses ultimately fail. and that 15-year count to 70% failure is they don't scale properly, and they grow themselves out of business and run out of money. And I don't know if you've seen that with some of your clients that grew too fast or didn't properly manage scale, or if they were mature enough to already know how to do that.
I've seen it. One company that was in my universe was Crunch Fitness. I love that company. It was when we owned it at Bally, and I was intimately involved with it. We had like 30 locations, and at the time, it was wildly respected as the hippest club around. And we're talking, the 80s and the 90s, and it was such a cool place. It was where all the models and celebrities hung out in New York and LA and San Fran. And it had a very unique customer experience, which was funky. Every company, every experience was eclectically designed, and it had interesting, design schemes, and no two were the same. And when we owned it, it had 30 locations. And when I left Bally, I wanted to buy it. I wanted to, because the company wasn't thrilled with its performance. I was trying to figure out a way to buy it. And ultimately that didn't work. But a person I knew who ran 24-Hour Fitness, a guy named Mark Mastrov, bought it from Bally. And now Crunch is about 500 locations. And what he did, I got to say, I didn't see it. What he did was he realized that creating all these unique one-of clubs with that kind of a high-end clientele did not scale. It was unscalable. You couldn't have hipness in Oklahoma. You couldn't have that kind of chic fitness club. So he turned it into a economy gym with the Crunch name, and turned it into something very much like Anytime Fitness, which was lowered the cost, had a lot of equipment, but standardized the model and created a template for it. And that template was very easy to scale, and it's now a giant national chain. And I got to say, I'm totally impressed with what he's done with Crunch. It was I didn't think it was possible. And but that's what he did, is he figured out that business model didn't scale, but that brand could be used to scale into something really amazing.
And had he not figured that out, we would probably be talking about Crunch, in the as a business that used to be, rather than one that's doing well.
Right. Clubs with 30 locations they're hard to run in these days, in this day and age, because there's so many mega gyms now. There's so many companies with 500, 1,000 or more locations. It's hyper competitive now. It was competitive then, but it's hyper competitive now. So yeah, brilliant case study in scaling.
So when, my experience in building a business is, you're all in for the first few years. I mean, there is no spare time. It's you're in 100%. And I would go in on a Monday and to the factory floor and not come home, quite literally, until Wednesday. And it's not like I slept on the couch in my office. I didn't have a couch in my office. I just worked all the way through it. And it didn't seem like that long because I was kind of in the zone, but that's kind of the life of an entrepreneur. At some point, though, that's unsustainable. I mean, not only does a business have to scale, the person behind it has to scale. You can't just run off fumes. So in your experience, what's the importance of a work-life balance?
That's the magic.
How do you invest in yourself?
Yeah, I blew it a couple of times. I told you about that music company I ran for a while, traveling around all the world. I didn't work out the way I did. I didn't get enough sleep, and it turned into a really grumpy, overstressed experience. And I don't think my creative juices were flowing as a result. So believe me, I've had a couple of, I'm speaking from experience when I say that work-life balance is the key to it all. And what comes with that, again, is you got to stay fit. You got to get exercise. You got to rest your brain. You got to get enough sleep, because sleep is the magic. Sleep is the key to it all. Without sleep, you're just going through the motions, and you're not creative. You're not energetic. You can juice yourself up with caffeine as much as you want and keep yourself going, but you're not at your best when you're not getting the right kind of sleep. You got to know what your limits are. And I guess I learned what mine were, and I've throttled back to the point where I do have a better work-life balance. Um, at times, you have to grind it out, but it's the old adage, being an entrepreneur is more of it's a marathon, not a sprint. If you treat it as a sprint every day, you're going to get really burnt out. So you gotta conserve your energy and treat it as a long-term proposition, or you're going to fail and burn out or have a very unhappy life. And I don't think it's sustainable to not have a work-life balance.
Yeah, I think the two things that are missing uh, in most entrepreneurs' early days are money and sleep. I think both are well needed and both are in short supply.
The thing is, it depends on the age of the entrepreneur. There's a lot of 25-year-old entrepreneurs, and they can go without sleep, and they have a different approach to things, and maybe life is always a sprint for them. Um, but the fact of the matter is, most entrepreneurs now are 50 plus. I think there's just either they've been ejected from the corporate world, or frustrated with corporate world, or looking for a post early retirement thing to do, or trying to start a business after retiring. So there's a lot of let's say aged entrepreneurs out there right now, and I think for us, work-life balance is so much more essential because you can't go without sleep. It's impossible. Your body breaks down.
Yeah,
Um, so you got to learn that work-life balance, and I think that comes with experience as well. You can grind it out when you're 25, but
right.
not when you're 65.
Yeah. We're starting to run out of time. I want to push a couple more questions through. What has a lifetime of pursuing mountains taught you about business? Or what
It's
has
fun.
business taught you about mountains? Either way.
It does go both ways. It goes both ways, and I'll tell you, I have a book project that I've been working on for 5 years, and it's called "The Mountains Made Me an Entrepreneur." And that's what it deals with. It's the interplay between business and mountaineering, and the lessons learned in both that go back and forth. And it's about a lot of the things that we just talked about. It's about persistence. It's about setting goals. It's about not giving up. It's about putting one foot in front of the other when you need to. It's about pivoting. Oftentimes on a climb, one route has got some impediments, so you have to go a different way up. Sometimes the weather's bad and you turn around and you go back down to the bottom and try another day. There's so many analogies, that go back and forth. And there are some books about this, but I thought for me, I have some pretty good stories in both business and mountaineering that turn into wonderful lessons learned for me that I thought were very shareable with a broader audience. And the reason I haven't finished this book, and I've written two since I got the idea for this book, which was my original book, is I'm sort of waiting for the home run. I think it gives me more credibility to have exited one of those companies I'm working on than here's a guy who's really good at hitting singles and doubles. So not that I'm waiting for the Elon Musk or Steve Jobs level of success to do this, because I think there's a lot of learning and grinding it out, and a long career of varied entrepreneurship. I've got so many lessons, but I got so many good stories about the mountains that are relevant, and I sort of inserted them in my book, Secrets of Aging Well. There's a touch of some of that, but The Mountains Made Me an Entrepreneur, I hope, is a book about entrepreneurship more than anything else, and my experiences in both worlds.
What advice would you give to an emerging entrepreneur? It could be a young person. It could be someone that has worked, most of their career in the Fortune 500 world and is stepping out onto their own. But what advice would you give to someone? What do you wish someone had told you when you first decided that it would be a good idea to do this on your own?
Steel yourself for the fact that it's probably harder than you think it is going in. It's probably, it's that bumpy ride. It's not going to be that smooth sailing. The difference between corporate life and entrepreneurship is vast. Some of the skills and thinking apply, but in corporate life, you take a couple of days off. The rock doesn't roll back down the hill by itself, and other people will pick up some slack, and your job will still be there. You take some time off as an entrepreneur, it's tough. You are the person pushing the rock up the hill, and you gotta be at it. So I would say be prepared for it to be harder than you think it is. Be prepared for setbacks. Be prepared for a rocky ride. Be prepared to learn a lot and be open to that learning and pivot if needed and accelerate when needed and keep your antenna up and learn a lot, do the maximum amount of learning. And, but again, the marketplace, that's the best teacher. Do it. Be proactive about getting out there. Don't write plan after plan after plan. Do something
Execute.
proactive out there. And even on a tiny scale, you learn something, and that teaches you how to do it better and on a bigger scale. So,
okay, we've just scared, rightly so, many new entrepreneurs with how hard it's going to be. Why is it worth it? How is it worth it?
Well, there's that concept of delay of gratification, right? So there's sometimes the biggest rewards are further down the road. You don't always need instant gratification. There's also just the satisfaction of doing it yourself. As a mountaineer, I had a couple of places I wanted to go and things I wanted to climb that I failed at a few times, but 10 years later, I went back at it and I was there and it worked well and great inner satisfaction. There's an incredible sense of accomplishment and confidence and self-efficacy you get when you learn that you're in charge of your own destiny. You make it's not somebody else. You're completely responsible for your own success or failure, and that's a really good feeling for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, Martin, I enjoyed talking to you. I enjoy this transition you made from corporate life to entrepreneurship and your intrapreneurship experience as well. And I would just encourage you to make a nice rum someday. Get the rum.
I'm actually working on a limoncello right now, so the rum will have to go after that. So,
good old limoncello. I have a lemon tree in my backyard.
There you go. You got the most.
Well, it's the most prolific tree I've ever had. I have an orange tree and a lemon tree, and the orange tree, it took about 12 years for it to produce its first orange, but my lemon tree is radioactive or something. I don't know what it's sitting on, but it just keeps producing lemons, and so many lemons that you can only give so many away, right? And it's not like you're sitting watching TV eating a lemon like any other fruit. So I did make limoncello once. Let's put it this way: I'm not starting a business making limoncello anytime soon. But it was a fun experience. It takes a lot of lemons to make limoncello, right? So, but that was a failed experiment. But that was my venture into a limoncello business that never made it past the kitchen. Well, thanks for sharing much of your advice with my audience and me. And I wish you continued success. I'll be keeping an eye out on the Over 50 gym. And hopefully I can say I knew that guy. You will be my home run.
Be in touch long before that happens, I'm sure.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thanks for sharing. For my audience who would like to get more information on Martin, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, the Reluctant Entrepreneur YouTube channel, just look down here somewhere and you'll see an area where I give some information on Martin and links to the books that he has written. And if you're listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast app, you can go to your podcast app and click on the show notes, and information will be there as well. Martin, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
A special thanks to Martin Pazzani for being my guest on the show. The Reluctant Entrepreneur podcast is available on all major podcast sites and on the Reluctant Entrepreneur YouTube channel. We've been busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so don't miss out. Subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are released. If you're an entrepreneur and would like to be my guest on the show, please let me know. Visit mikeconrad.com/podcast and apply to be a guest. Just remember, that's Conrad spelled with a K. If you'd like to reach out to me, my email address is mike@mikeconrad.com. Again, that's Conrad spelled with a K. If you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available as a paperback and as a Kindle version, both available on Amazon, and as an audiobook available on both Audible and Amazon. Thanks again for listening or watching. Until I see you again, stay unstoppable.